Welcome to Therapy Sessions, Cutting Toxic Family Ties. My name is Dr. Sherry Campbell, and I'm your host. I am a leading expert in the niche of toxic family abuse, and although my show cannot substitute for therapy, it is a survivor-based show. In me, you're not only going to get an expert, but you're also going to get a survivor, as I have also survived toxic family abuse. I know how hard it is. The goal I have is to give voice to the voiceless, to provide skills to help you to protect your peace, to stand your solid ground, and to navigate and heal the heartbreaks caused by toxic family. Please have a pen and paper available to give voice to your thoughts as you listen to each show. Thank you for joining me. Thank you for your bravery. So let the healing begin. Welcome back, everyone, to Therapy Sessions, Cutting Toxic Family Ties. We are here with fan favorite, Josh Connolly, one of my favorite experts in this field. I feel like he's a brother from another mother. And I've interviewed him before, but this is going to be a much better interview because I've improved my skill set. So Josh has his book. It's coming out now in the United States. You can go on Amazon right now and order it. It's called It's Them, Not You. And it's all about breaking toxic family ties. And Josh is a breathwork expert. And so I have so many questions here, Josh, to ask you, but tell us what it's been like having your book out in the UK.
Yeah, well, look, firstly, thank you for having me back on. And I thought last time was brilliant. So if you've improved, it's going to be amazing this time around. It's been amazing. Like, it was very nervous when it came out last year because, you know, I feel like when I put content out or when I facilitate sessions, I'm sort of confident in what I'm doing. So I get a sense of if it's good or maybe if it's not, and I can see why, but I just had no idea with the book. And so, yeah, to hear and read and see it changing people's lives in the way that I hoped it would has been amazing, really. And it's been a bit of a whirlwind since I did a tour here in the UK with it, and we did, you know, there was like over 1,000 people in the end that came to over the course of the session. So it's just been incredible on a personal level from where I've come from to where I am now to be releasing a book. It's coming out in a bunch of different languages and obviously in the States. And so, yeah, I feel very grateful to put it out there. I guess one thing is that it didn't like pierce the mainstream too much here. They still don't want to talk about this kind of thing here, right? But that was always going to be the case. And it was a bestseller here. So
well,
yeah.
I have no doubt that it's going to pierce here. Luckily, you know, when I first wrote But It's Your Family, I just thought I would be stoned off the earth. And then I ended up doing a TED Talk, and I love your work, and my following loves you. And I know that it's going to pierce here because it's much more open here. And No Contact, I'm the first expert in the United States to write about it. Other people may have written about it that weren't experts, but I am the first that wrote about No Contact. And so you will be so welcomed. And I want everyone to get his book. If you don't follow Josh on social media, you really, really, really need to. And we cover very similar topics in our books, but we're covering it from two different vantage points in some ways, right? We both talk about, so these are some of the things that I just want to dive deeply into. Your book really confronts the common narratives of blood is thicker than water, you know, family is everything. When I wrote my book, But It's Your Family, I didn't know I was going to be confronting these things at all. So I was shocked at first by the backlash, you know, from some of the especially the rejected parents, right? And now I've got very thick skin. But what inspired you to address them directly? I didn't do that until my second or third book, but this is your first book out. What inspired you to address these societal beliefs, and how do they impact the individuals in the family?
Well, look, I've always been a truth seeker, right? I think one of the things that this whole process of writing the book has taught me is that I've always been somebody that pierced through the kind of societal norms that we're supposed to stick to. And I spent a lot of my time as a child being scapegoated by adults simply for telling the truth, not just in the family system that I was in, but actually within the schooling system and everything like that too. And so my own journey was one of like leaning into and facing the uncomfortable truths. And what I realized when I started talking publicly about the impacts of essentially emotional abuse by a parent, I just realized how like it just wasn't talked about, right? People didn't confront it. People still want to sweep it under the carpet. It amazes me the level that people go to online to kick back against what I'm saying. And by the way, we're not just talking about the parents that have been rejected. There's a high level of people that think that even like some men's spaces over here, a lot of people in the sort of healing space in general kick back at what I say. They say that in talking about this, I'm perpetuating victimhood and all that kind of stuff. And like, I think that most people would rather avoid the uncomfortable reality than face the uncomfortable reality. And what I know to be true is when you dare to face the uncomfortable reality and walk through it, you'll come through the other side and you'll be looking back at everybody over there who's acting like you're crazy, realizing I'm much more comfortable with the fact that I'm not crazy. And also, because I've done that journey, I've journeyed through it and I'm this side, I don't even need you to think that I'm not crazy.
Isn't that liberating? Because I've found that in my own journey is that I was so in alignment with the truth from the youngest of ages. And I expressed it as a child through sensitivity and tears and fear. And they weren't going to have any of that. So go to your room, do whatever. But I agree that there's even this upper level. I once was told that I'm destroying the American family. I'm perpetuating victimhood, or this world is over therapized and therapists are tearing apart families now. No, what's happening is that more and more truth seekers are coming. The information is more available and it's in alignment with other people's truths. So then, but again, that high level societal kickback is an avoidance of that because there's no control. I think it's interesting that parents can cut children off and it's tough love. But if a child cuts a parent off, it's like satanic. It's like the worst thing you could do. And I think these societal pressures also keep people stuck in their families because they're not just going against that family. Now they're going to be rejected by society, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Do you see that as well? Like your family's toxic, but the thought of separating from them would then bring a whole other consequence.
Yeah, well, we see this regularly with abuse, right? So like, particularly it happens, emotional abuse runs through all abuse, right? We know that. But in emotional abuse, it's driven by a level of power and it's driven by a level of trust. When you have lots of trust and lots of power, you are in a position to be able to abuse that person. And so we've created this society and this culture where if you come out and say, I've had to distance myself from my parent, the parent still keeps the upper hand because most people go, well, why would you do that? You only get one mum and dad. And then what they do is they compare it to that big mistake that everybody's parents once made. And this isn't remotely the same, right? We're talking about abuse here. We're talking about toxicity here. And so you won't just be shunned by your family. You'll likely be shunned by society, or you'll have to live in secrecy about the fact that you don't talk to your parent. So some people end up staying in abusive relationships. So that is like forcing a child to stay in an abusive relationship with their parent, an adult child, by the way. That's what rips families apart, because it will, that adult child is then much more likely to suffer the consequences of being the victim of abuse and then pass that down into the next generation. So talking about abuse doesn't ruin families. Abuse does. Talking about it gives the opportunity and the chance to save future families. That's the reality.
I totally agree. I've said too that the conflict in the family doesn't start at no contact.
No.
It's wild to me that there's this belief that it's the no contact that started the problem. And their child suddenly cut off and they don't know why. And yet you had 4.5 decades or decades of chances. It's not sudden ever. And it doesn't start at no contact. It started decades before no contact. And that's what I think is being framed now is, well, you're encouraging people to go no contact. And as if that's where the conflict starts. It's just like you said, Josh, once someone starts speaking on it, there's an opportunity to heal at that point. If you have a power hungry power holder, right, who's got all the power, then they're going to be offended by any mirror up to exposing their bullshit.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah. And people that are uncomfortable with reality will make you feel like you're crazy for living in it. Right. And so,
that's right.
So you see that play out all of the time. And what a lot of people talk about, and even when we talk about people talk about conflict resolution and bringing families together and all, there's a real lack of understanding of what we're talking about here. When we talk about abuse or toxicity, whatever you want to call it, however you want to frame it, we're not talking about a general lack of communication all round, right? We're talking about a single person manipulating and abusing their power and trust, and they will never communicate. I often say to people that come with this line of communication and believing that it starts at no contact, if you say to somebody, would you tell a child that they just need to build boundaries in with a sexual abuser? And most people, they're like, no, I wouldn't let them near him ever again. So it's so why is it other forms of abuse? You seem to want to think that the victim somehow plays a role in this. I mean, we've not moved on fully from when sexual abuse happens to females. You know, there is still sometimes people will go down the road of, well, what were you wearing? Did you bring it on yourself? Did you, right? They'll victim blame in that way. So actually, when you start to look at abuse, we've got this really odd view of looking at it, where we rather than pushing for accountability from the abuser, we look to the victim to try and make them sort of be the one that fixes the problem.
I can so appreciate that too, because I think what I have found is that when there's a conflict, people seem to want to know what the abuser needs to get better.
Yeah.
Okay. So, but what resources can we give the abuser? How can we make the abuser better? Well, what about the resources for the survivor? What about what we need? What about those things? We were carrying the pain of this person, this generational trauma coming from this person. And you're going to worry about what the abuser needs, not the person who actually needs the resources and the support. It is so twisted. And Josh, I don't know how you feel, but I feel like this twisted dynamic is the most heavily seen from a child to a parent, because you can cut off a boss. People encourage you. Don't work under that boss anymore. Get rid of that boyfriend or girlfriend. We're going to remove you from that teacher's class. Right? Yeah, you should cut your kid off, teach him a lesson. But my God, the second a child takes a stand against their parental abusers, well, they didn't, you can't do that. You just can't. They brought you here. You owe them. They're getting older, all this stuff that's going on. So I so appreciate what you just said about, all of the blame gets put on the victim and the victim has got to fix. And what people don't understand is the victim has been fixing it all along.
Yeah.
The whole time we've been over-functioning, overcompensating, over-forgiving, all this stuff.
Yeah. And like you say, no contact isn't the start of it. No contact is normally the end of trying absolutely everything possible nearly all of the things in the end at the expense of yourself in order to try and fix it. And most people that go no contact, before they go no contact, would have accepted a shoestring of a shoestring of some kind of accountability or some kind of communication from the person that they've gone no contact with. But it's never going to come. It will never come. And, you know, our work, my work, I'm sure you're the same. Actually, if you break down what I don't encourage anybody to go no contact. I encourage people to see people for exactly as they are. See your parent for exactly as they are. Acknowledge there's nothing you can do to change them. So you got to see them as they are, and then make a decision. Do I have a shot at freedom in my life in a relationship with this person as they are? And unfortunately, the answer is no for some people, you know?
Well, and I so appreciate that, Josh, because one of the things that I say all the time that my following is very used to hearing from me is acceptance is where it's at. You have to accept them for exactly who they are. I have never once encouraged any patient in my office, anyone in social media to go no contact. I would never make a decision like that for somebody because it might not be the right decision. I stayed 4.5 decades very proudly. I used to have this feeling like I wish I would have done it sooner, but I now know that I unturned every stone. I have absolutely no doubt. And what I kept finding, the more distance I created over about 12 years, was I just felt so much better when they weren't in my life.
Yeah.
My life was peaceful. My body was healthier. My spirit was healthier. You know, and speaking of that, you really do a lot of breath work, right? That is really your way through healing. And it's so powerful. And I want you to share a little bit about how this practice aids people in the healing of their trauma. How does breath work do that?
Look, I think the big missing piece of the puzzle for a lot of people is the things that get trapped in our body that we can't necessarily comprehend, rationalize. Perhaps it's a memory stored in our body from before we even had a rational part of our brain, right? And so things like breath work, which is my favorite, but any kind of somatic practice that allows us to move into our body, feel the emotions and let them move through and be released, it's going to be of huge benefit. And then that's why in the book, at the end of every chapter, there's a QR code, you scan it and it takes you and you do a full breathwork practice, which will help you to really release some of the emotions and some of the struggles that you have that you can't reach necessarily with the rational work. So it's not about one or the other. It's about marrying the two up. How do I release what's in my body? How do I make sense of my experience and merging those things together so that it's really like a holistic approach to how you heal and how you move through healing. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that, because one of the things that I relate to, because of course I follow you and I see some of the things that you're doing, and I can tell you're an athlete and I'm an athlete, and I look back and I look at being an athlete as sort of a somatic exercise. I had a space where movement was medicine. I was a very high level figure skater. And I grew up in a ski resort, so I've been skiing my whole life. I've mountain bike raced a lot in my life when I was still living in that state. I'm very active today. I'm a very avid tennis and pickleball player now, but I did Muay Thai for a long time. Getting those feelings in my body, moving through my body, and I run all the time, and running is like a meditation for me. And I was thinking about you on my run yesterday because I'm like, I've never done breath work the way you do it, but I was breathing, running, and I was just seeing the value in my life. And my mind goes into a much different space when I'm being active or I'm moving my body. And I think that people don't really understand how deeply the body holds our trauma and how important it is in general to compete, to move, to breathe, to be able to be in your body instead of all in your head. I find that I'm out of my head when I'm moving my body. Do you find that is we get stuck up in our heads a lot when we're not in our body.
Yeah. And I think that we've almost created a culture that wants to get you up in your head, that tries to tell you that you solve everything in your head. But actually, when you, through anything, exercise, running, sport, when you connect your head with your heart and you can feel that the two are aligned, that's when you feel freedom, right? That's when you feel a sense of presence. When you get into that flow state when you're running and you drop down from your head into your body and you're just thinking about the next step in front of you and you're just in your body, your mind becomes free then because you're not up in your head. And of course, it makes sense that if you grew up in dysfunction, that you would seek safety in your head because it would have been too scary to be in your body because you'd have had all of these subtle ways that your parent would have been manipulating you and all these feelings that you would have been picking up and sensing and feeling in your body. It wasn't safe to be in your body. Of course you went up in your head. And so anything that brings us back into our body. And look, I just think like the West, almost like, it's like hyper-capitalism that wants to tell you that the reason you should run is so that you can be faster and more fit. But the reason you should run or do anything like that is so that you can be in your body. And if you look at like throughout the history of time, ancient civilizations, you will always see them moving, doing crazy things with their bodies and their faces. And we all just think, oh, it's because they're not as advanced and they were just a bit like crazy back then. But it's not. No, it's not. What they were doing is they had an understanding that when they were in their bodies, shaking, releasing, pulling faces, letting out what's in my body is something that I should be doing on a regular basis. And it's very, very natural.
And I think they're actually more advanced. I think they're more advanced than us spiritually because they're really connected. I think that I would agree with you, Josh, in the West, that we are really running around here in a very competitive with other type of mindset where, I'm in perimenopause, Josh, and I run very slow now because I just want to move my body. Perimenopause has put me in quite a bit of pain that I've never had as my hormones change. And I'm trying to figure out, all of the magnesium and the natural ways that I can help support my body through this transition. But I've accepted my body to be when I'm running, I think of just do a menopause run with love, just move your body, breathe, and I look at diet. I try to eat a lot of very fertile foods, like the more color, the better, right? All of these things really matter. And I think those cultures are more advanced because when I think of advancement, I don't think of things. I think of how grounded somebody is. I think of how solid or stable or truthful someone can be as an advanced person, right? And I just think that the way that you're teaching breath work, and when I see that you do these things, like I saw you with a bunch of men, and I just love this. You were doing like a cold plunge at you were outside.
Big lake,
it wasn't,
yeah,
it wasn't a spa. You were out there, and what I loved about watching that and what I really attached to and what I appreciate about you so much is how much love you bring into these things that you do. These men are hugging each other. You guys are having an experience together that is hard on the body or shocking to the body, right? To go jump in the cold plunge, that hurts. I've done that. It aches at first, and then it's sort of this liberating thing. But you're outside and it's so beautiful. So you have all of these elements. Like for me in California, I got to go to a spa to do that. I can't just go outside. Now, maybe where I grew up, I could, but you bring so much connection. And I think when we connect through the body and not the mind, or having an experience together, that this is got to be really bonding and very healing for the people that you do this for and with.
Yeah. And what you've touched on really for me is so important because you're talking about community, you're talking about love, you're talking about connection through the body, right? And this links to one of the things that we were talking about earlier. I think that the kind of spirituality as it's seen in today's world. Now, you're a very spiritual person, right? I have a very spiritual practice, but spirituality has become like running's become, which is like everybody's trying to be the most spiritual person. So what people think spirituality is forgiving everybody and reaching this place where I just see everybody as love and light and nobody's bad. And like there's, and all of that. And it looks great online and it sounds brilliant, but it is not rooted in truth. So it might make you look good on Instagram because you can go, I went through all of this hardship and I was abused and I've forgiven everybody and none of it affects me anymore. But that's not rooted in reality. It's not rooted in truth. I have a deeply spiritual practice and I also have a knowing that my body and me, I live in reality. And so when you show me who you are, I will believe you and I will make a decision on where you get to be in my life. And I ain't supposed to love everybody. I'm supposed to get angry by things that are not nice because then the anger motivates me to do what I need to make sure that doesn't happen in my again. So, because a lot of people go to me, oh, you seem angry. And I'm like, oh, I am angry. I'm talking about a child being abused by their parent. You're damn right I'm angry. Why aren't you angry? But I would argue, and I believe, that being able to be in my anger, recognize it, see it, let it move through me in a positive, life-changing, affirming way, that's what true spirituality is. True spirituality is not this idea that you reach a place where you only have good love and light, positive emotions. That's just false. It's fake and it's not real, in my opinion.
Well, I think it really lets people down because you can never be good enough under that type of belief system.
Exactly.
You just can't. You will fail because you are human. I really appreciate that you brought up the anger because I get, not only is that said in a lot of my book reviews, but it's been asked to me in interviews if I'm angry. And I say to them this, anger is the emotion that loves me the most.
Yeah.
You cannot have a spiritual practice without boundaries or discipline. And if I'm going to host people that pull me away from myself, then I'm a spiritual fake, right? And I don't really talk about my spirituality very much because I've had incredible miracles throughout my life since very young ages that I didn't understand at the time. But I know that if I didn't have those, that I might have committed suicide. Okay. Because I was very suicidal by 5th grade. And that's a very young age to be thinking. I had no plan, but I was like praying at night that I would die. I wasn't raised in religion. I'm very much a, more of a universe girl. And this is a life class that I'm in. I'm in school. I'm learning things here on planet Earth as this person, as this soul. I'm here to teach things. I'm here to serve other people. And it's going to be fucking hard. Okay. And yeah, I'm angry that I was abused. Very angry. And that is that emotion that fought for justice for me. And, I don't forgive people who have abused me because they aren't sorry. And it didn't serve me. When I tried that forgiveness, I got more abused. So maybe it's semantics to people, but I accept my parents, especially and sibling, for exactly who they are. And that means I cannot have them in my life and be a healthy person. So when people get into the spirituality, like sort of the facade of it and it's image based, those people end up letting themselves down so deeply that they sometimes end up in a very dark place, or they just continue in the facade and they're actually harming people. Because there's a spiritual abuse or a religious abuse that can happen in these toxic families as well. Right. And I think that anger is the only emotion that will drive us to set a boundary. Sadness won't do it. Anxiety is not going to do it. Fear is not going to do it. So you better love your anger because your anger will save your life and it will bring you justice. You may not get justice from your perpetrators, but when you are disciplined and you set boundaries around yourself for self-preservation, then you get justice because you've given it to yourself, right? Exactly.
And if you look throughout the history of society, the greatest moments of change were driven by people who used their anger in a good way. Martin Luther King was angry. Thank God he was. The suffragettes were angry. Thank God they were. They took their anger. They saw it. They saw that there was a misplace of justice. So they were angry and they did something with it. And so anger is very healthy. It's very needed. We often think of rage as being the same as anger, but actually that's something slightly different. And by the way, happens when people don't know how to use their anger in a healthy way. That's when they end up rageful. So this, the performative spirituality that's out there, the moment anybody is doing lots of external things to show me that they're spiritual, I'm questioning their spirituality. Now, don't get me wrong, right? I love all of that stuff. I'm into it. I have a deep spiritual practice, but like you, I don't need to show you that because it's something that's in my heart. And if you get close enough to me and spend time with me, you'll see it. And I won't need to show you it. And I see it in other people. And this idea of pushing forgiveness is dangerous. In a lot of cases where there's abuse, it's dangerous to push it. And again, there's lots of examples throughout the history of society where forgiveness has been pushed without retribution, and it's harmful. So if somebody, and people say to me, but you can't live a life of resentment. And I'm like, if you resent your abuser and they're still alive, out there smear campaigning you and still trying to get to you, then your resentment will keep you safe. Right? So you just make sure that you know what it is, you be aware of it, and then you do some work. And maybe you'll work towards a place where you can let go of the resentment, but there's loads of work that has to be done there. So jumping straight in at somebody who is still abuser, is still out there, still trying to abuse them, and starting at you need to forgive is dangerous, and it's appalling behavior, really. And yet it's what's pushed out there by everybody.
Yeah, it's really ignorance, right? Mm-hmm. And those are the people that have never lived it, or they're supporting the people that are perpetrating it, right? When you're pushing forgiveness on a victim, you're actually supporting their abuser. Mm-hmm. And now you're just doubling the dose of the pain. You're not giving it an antidote. Whether their intention is good or not, it doesn't really matter. I have like a little formula that I think that you will love, and I think that the listeners will love. Anger that is repressed turns to rage, right? So anger is a natural emotion. If you repress an emotion, it becomes unnatural. If you repress guilt, it becomes shame. If you repress sadness, it becomes depression. If you repress love, it becomes possession. If you repress envy, it becomes jealousy. All of those counterparts are really unnatural. Right. And I think that the thing about the being in your body is you can healthfully not allow yourself to repress these emotions and store them in your body. The thing is if you do, you can end up, psychoneuroimmunology is a huge field. I mean, they will make you ill. Your parents, if you stay long enough and they're toxic, they will kill you. Because you're going to be you can't be yourself in a family like that. You end up enraged in a family like that because your anger is never heard. Anger really is not an emotion that's coming out screaming and yelling. It's coming out with enough is enough. Enough is enough. Anger is very clear. It brings closure to chaos, right? And I think it's the emotion that loves us the most. And it is truly the only emotion that will drive you, like Martin Luther King or Gandhi or anybody, to set a boundary, right? So Josh, I want to talk to you a little bit about boundaries. We'll just kind of segue into there. So what strategies? I think that, as experts, we all have our own way that we encourage people to set boundaries or how they can set boundaries. What have you found helpful, or what do you advise to people on the how-tos when it comes to boundaries?
The main thing that I think that you need to get clear on, so the great place to start is the body work, by the way, so that you can come back in and you can start to know your own feelings and start to know yourself. You have to start there, because from there, you then can get clear on your rights. I always say you should get clear on your rights. So like if we're talking about the parent relationship with an adult child, it can be like if you are still in low contact or they're in your life, right, and you're trying to navigate that, then it's like, what do I have the right to here? Maybe a right might look like, I have the right to tell my parents they have to leave if they drink around my children. That's a perfectly acceptable right, yeah? I have the right to not have one of my parents raise their voice at me. I have the right to not have my parent make me question my reality. When you get clear on all of these rights and you write them down and you see them, then when you come to that needing to lay the boundary, needing to enforce the boundary, you're clear on it. Because I think what most people do is go, I just don't want my parent to treat me like this. So then when they're around them, they're like, oh, I don't want them to treat, and then they can't. But if you're clear on it, then you're able to go, I have the right to not have you here when you're drinking alcohol. You've drank alcohol. You have to leave now. Yeah. Or you're making me question my reality. You have to leave now. And when you're very clear on them, it makes them easier, at least, to enforce the boundary. Yeah.
Yeah. I really appreciate that. I call that finding your bottom line.
Yeah.
Right. And I worked on that really hard in my own therapy, because one thing I think with survivors is there's so much chaos and so much confusion because we're just questioning our reality, or we've been trained. I really believe that we're not raised. I believe that we're trained to be very predictable to these people so that they can continue their abusive pattern, right? And so working through that, I would always go into a journal where my left brain would be absorbed in the task so that my right brain could really come down. And I just worked really hard to find my bottom line. And one thing I find is that your bottom line is one sentence. That clarity that you're talking about, I so appreciate that, because when you're clear and you've got your bottom line, or you know your rights using your words, is now you can go in and it's clear. And then there doesn't need to be conversation after you set the boundary if they bait you. It's like, I've said what I need to say. This is my boundary. You need to leave now.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that's really helpful.
Yeah.
So Josh, when you look at the setting of the boundaries that you did, another way that I had to is I would set a boundary and then I'd get gaslit, all the things. I also encourage, and it's a saying that my following is very familiar with, but I learned to, at some point, shut my mouth and use my feet.
Yeah.
Your feet can set boundaries for you. If you move your body away from the contagion, because at some point using your mouth doesn't work. To even say you're drinking, you need to leave. That cannot work sometimes. So if you shut your mouth and you use your feet and you get your body away, right? Or you enforce that their body gets out. That's a whole other effective way to set a boundary. It doesn't always require words, right? We can use our bodies to do it too.
Yeah. And once you have the clarity around your, as you would say, bottom line or your rights, the way that you enforce it, whether you leave and all of that kind of stuff, at least you can lean back on, why am I doing this? Yeah. I'm leaving because my rights have been passed, So when you're clear on it, I think the clarity piece is such an important piece, because they're going to gaslight you. They're going to make you, they've always done it. They're always going to make you question your reality. Am I being a crazy one? Am I overreacting? Is this me? Am I being unreasonable? All of that's you're going to have all of that go through your mind. But if you can fall back on, well, no, I said they're not to be here drunk, and they are, then you can always fall back on it. And that's just, obviously, that's like one of a million examples, them being drunk. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think when we're getting angry inside, it's very dialed into, it's time to say no. And if you don't say no, then you're abandoning the child within you, just in the same ways that your parents abandoned you. You and I both really love the inner child work and the inner child dynamic. And I think, again, all experts do this uniquely, but it's in your book as well, that the inner child work is just so important. And because you do a lot of breath work and all that type of stuff, I'm curious if you could tell the listeners how you do your inner child work. And do you do that through breath work? And how does it facilitate healing? Like, help them see the value.
I think when you start to realize that the mistakes that you've made and the ways that you've acted in your life are all rooted in trying to keep that little you safe. And actually, when you start to realize that so much of the reconnection work is about removing the barriers you've placed to get them safe, I think it can be some of the most powerful work that you do. And so I often use a breath work to get me to that kind of altered state, and then we'll have moments where I visit my inner child and I be with them and I see what's coming up for them. And I also do a lot of journaling, and there's I don't know, you probably tried it, but where you write back from your inner child and you do it with your non-dominant hand. And there's something really powerful about that. So I do quite a lot of that like fairly regularly. I run a couple of online programs and they're all about reconnecting with your inner child. And in fact, the whole book, the premise of the whole book is to take you on a journey to reconnect with them so that you can bring them home. And actually, that comes back to, because they're always in your heart. So in many ways, that is that reconnection with your heart, coming home to yourself so that you're no longer hiding. Because ultimately we spend a lot of our lives as a result of all this stuff hiding from ourselves.
Oh, yeah. Mm. Yeah. Well, we were taught that we were an unlovable, unimportant, unlikable person, right? When you're taught that and you're just in going through your normal course of development and that is what you're learning along the way, then you have to undo all of that later in life. And that is, kind of about coming home. And I think I appreciate that because we have to come home to ourselves. We all have individual bodies for a reason. Creation made it this way for a reason. We are here to separate and individuate and have an individual experience of this lifetime. And I think that one of the ways that I look at my life that's been helpful to help me really grab hold of my inner child is like, my mom is a life class. My dad is a life class and I'm their teacher in their mind, but how they learn isn't up to me. What they take from the class isn't up to me. I have to put my blinders on and think about what do I want to get out of this class? How can I pass it? I have to pass it with more love for myself, not less. I have to pass it with a deeper level of self-awareness, not less. I'm doing the hard work and homework in this class. I'm not trying to skip assignments, right? And inner child work is hard. I'll share with you that the first time I was probably 19 and I went to this hypnotherapist and she did a guided imagery and I went all the way down to my inner child and I saw my inner child in the corner and she had me go over to my inner child. And when I picked my inner child up, turned to stone.
Wow.
And she was like, well, maybe try to hug her. And I tried to hug her and she turned to sand and she went away. And that process just kept happening over and over and over. And so at first I was punishing myself like, God, even my inner child doesn't like me. Right? It was all of these things. But when I was little, if I really look at it, I would turn to stone when they were around and I'd be stiff and I'd be all tense trying to figure out what I'm supposed to do next, whose emotions I have to regulate. And if anything ever came to me, I did want to be vapor because I just wanted to disappear from them if I could get out of sight. And as I went through my life, because I thought I failed at finding my inner child, that's how I left there. Because that's my whole program was you're just a failure. I look at it now as a great success. And I'm so glad that I've had time to develop the self-awareness and just sort of like, why did that happen? And why am I punishing myself over something that was just a naturally occurring thing? Well, that was my process. I had to be vapor or turn to stone to protect myself. And as I've gotten to know myself and I cannot love myself unless I know myself. And now I don't picture that would ever happen again because I feel very in touch with that part of me. Some people find the languaging of the inner child to be hokey or unbelievable. And I just look at that as a resistance to happiness or a resistance to fear because you've got to go in and rescue that part of you. If you don't want to call it the inner child, then call it something else. But whatever you're protecting in your life, your boundaries are set to protect that core part of you.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's another thing that you could say it's your core self, right? You could talk about it in whatever way you want. But I do think that if you're putting barriers in front of something that you can see is bringing life and healing and openness to other people, then you're putting barriers rather than it being an issue with what it actually is,
Yeah. I feel that, this is such a beautiful journey. I mean, it's really, really hard because self-awareness is challenging. You've got to look at aspects of yourself that you both like and that you don't like, right? And I think self-acceptance is a huge part of it. And like you were talking about the spiritual people with their billboards, advertising how spiritual they are. Well, you absolutely know they're not, right? It's just rhetoric. But it's sort of the same way with self-worth. I went through a phase where there were people around going, I know my worth on like repeat. And I'm thinking, well, if you know it, then why are we advertising it?
Yeah.
Why not just know it? Why not just live it? And I think that part of healing is learning to live with like moccasins on. Just live your journey. Your experience of who you are, the peace that you feel inside is going to have the most indelible effect on other people. I think people look at victims as chaotic because we're setting boundaries. And I think that the result of boundaries for other people is chaos because they're losing control.
Yeah.
But the victim is actually very much at peace. It's the response to the boundaries is where all the chaos is.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And you know, there's a very common saying, isn't there, that the people that act crazy when you lay a boundaries are proof that you needed to lay the boundary. And it is. I mean, it's simple, but it's very true. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that when people see chaos, they retreat and they want it to go away. So they go to fix that other person, because I think when you go no contact and like you're considering cutting ties with toxic family, I have certain criteria that I think, you know, people can look for. If they ask me like, well, how do you know if you should go no contact? What do you tell people, Josh? What are those factors that they should evaluate before they go no contact?
I'll come straight back to what I said earlier, which is you have to see the person for exactly as they are. Give up trying to change them in any way. Let go of the idea or the belief that your behavior or the way that you show up may change them, that you might just be able to get them to see. You have to see them for exactly as they are, and then evaluate the impact that they have on your life. And then you have to make a decision. How much am I willing to accept? How much of what they are giving me am I willing to accept? And a great question to ask yourself sometimes is, by staying in contact with them, what am I saying no to? You know, and so you might be saying no to freedom. You might be saying no to well-being. You might be saying no to happiness. You might be saying no to, you know, a bunch of other positive things. So I think it's such an individual decision, but we can only talk about, as an outsider, I can only talk about truths. And the truth is, you don't have the power to change somebody else. And you should see them for exactly as they are and make a decision on that. So yeah.
I love that, because what you're basically saying is, and I've never heard it put that way before, so I so appreciate that, is what are you saying no to by staying?
Yeah.
It's like you're saying no to self-worth, positive self-worth. You're saying no to an experience of what genuine love or community might be. You're saying no to healthy generations to come. You're saying no to your life. You're saying no to passing your own life classes. Right? I think we're all here. I think we all have a purpose, whatever that purpose may be. And whatever that is, I want to be in alignment with whatever is true for me. Right? And I've known and I've seen over time, I've had many times that I thought no one's going to ever see my truth, especially because my smear campaign was so violent and it was so ongoing. But the writing of my books has been a really healing journey for me, because my truth, their lies burned down the whole forest. And so I felt like, well, I have nothing to lose, you know, and a publisher had reached out to me. And so I chose to write that book, and it's been life-changing. It's been liberating for me because, one, I didn't know there was such community out there. I had no idea. I'm that first expert that put no contact into writing over here in America as an expert. I won't claim that other people haven't written about it, but I put it into the professional dynamic out here. And it was warmly received by people who were experiencing it, right? And I think that you talk a lot about too, Josh, like just the role of community. And I hear a lot of people feeling like they can't find community, that they don't know how to have relationships because their family was such a bad place to be. They don't trust people. But I do think that you have to find community. And talk to us about what role you think community plays, and what are some ways that people can, because I almost find a refusal to find it in some survivors, right? And I can understand it. They're afraid of people or whatnot, but I think we need community to heal. Tell us about, because that's really important in your book as well. So what are some ways that you think people can find that community?
The core of it, you have to remember that community doesn't necessarily mean that you're building a community of people that are all exactly like you, right? So you don't have to go out and find like necessarily a community that are healing, not straight away, but you build it. You can slowly build a circle, a tight-knit circle that becomes a bit of a community. You can do that by, it could be joining a gym class. It could be joining a yoga class, right? And just gently leaning into trying to build trust in and with people again, because it can be very easy to start to just think that everyone's bad, right? And I have to be careful that I don't, because the echo chamber that I end up existing in is I just, they all come to my page, all these, the horrible people, they all come there. So if you're not careful, I'm sure you experience that, right? So you end up, if you're not careful, you do think everybody's bad, but the world is full of good people. The world is full of good people. And I'm sorry to anybody that's lived a life that's taught them that people are bad, because, it's a core belief of mine, if I'm not careful, that people genuinely will hurt you. But my reality has taught me that there's good people out there. You just have to be willing to risk. You have to be willing to risk. And you can really find your family, You don't only get one mum and dad. I've got lots of mothering and fathering figures in my life today, and I'm very grateful for that. Yeah.
Yeah, I had a woman in my social media say to me in a message in a DM, she's like, I wish I could have been your mom.
Yeah.
And it was I just cried. It just touched my heart so deeply, because it just feels good to hear that. And I think too, Josh, I love what you just said, because there really are good people out there. And I also think that you're a really good person. Each individual listening to this episode, you're a really good person. And you can only grow so much in solitary. We really need relationships. I think our relationships are our greatest teachers. You will likely get hurt in every relationship you're in. If it's a deep relationship, not everybody is toxic. There are normally flawed people that you can actually work things through with, but loneliness is a choice, and if that's a choice that you're making, and that might protect you from your family, but it's keeping you lonely in the world, and you can only be so self-aware in solitude. We need mirrors. We need community. We need people. And you're so big on community. And it's like you said, and I love what you said, because you don't have to find a community that's just like you. You don't need to go seek out every toxic family community that's out there. Like, you could get into a running club.
Yeah.
You could get into a knitting club, whatever is your fancy. It's about being around other people, learning to be around other people, because at the end of the day, when you're healing, you are your greatest protector. It's learning that you can go out into community and protect yourself no matter what. And to be grateful in some respect that you had great trainers on how to protect yourself if your family was toxic. You know how to do it. And I think that limiting love could be a safe way to live your life, but is it? I mean, is that safe, or are you abandoning yourself by not finding a community?
Yeah.
And I love watching you, Josh, because the way that you bring people together in big groups is I just think it's so powerful. For me, I find that hard to find out here.
Yeah.
I don't find that easy to access, and nor is it easy to navigate all the traffic here in California, right? But I like to even just be outside running. I see lots of cars. I've got my doggy. Like I'm seeing people, so even that, sitting in a coffee shop, if you go there regularly, people will start to say hello to you. They'll know your order. Like, there are so many gentle ways to find community.
Yeah.
And you really support that. You see that as such an important thing, because like you said, we can find love elsewhere.
Yeah. Yeah. Community is integral to healing, in my opinion. And trauma happens in relationships, so healing happens in relationships. I think what a lot of us do, and I certainly have been guilty of this, is when you do start to work on yourself, you do start to find peace in your own company, right? Which was new for me. I used to need people to get my sense of self-worth. So I now find a lot more peace in solitude. I do love that. But I have to be careful that I don't use that as an excuse to never be around people, because if I'm not around people, then I don't have to do any work on myself because I'm not in relationship. So, it's integral. And maybe I should come to California. We should do an event in California.
Oh my God,
find a venue. I'm deadly serious. Find a venue and I'll come over and we'll do a breath work.
I would love that. And I'll come see you because I've never been to Europe and I really want to go one day.
Yeah,
so
well, there you go.
I think that we would be a dream team, to be honest, because I just think that we have so much in common. Sometimes when you're talking, I'm like, my gosh, it's like he could have taken that right out of my own spirit. I do just love you. I just think you're such a special human being and what you're doing in this world is so meaningful. And when you told me that your book was coming out here, and I'm going to do everything I can to get this episode pushed up if I can. But I think that there's we should do an event. I will find a venue. I've never put together an event, so I'll need your help that way. But
if you can find a decent venue, between the two of us, we'd be able to run an event that we could make work that would mean that I could get over there. I'm deadly serious. Let's make it happen. Find a venue and then we'll get the ball rolling and we can do it.
Okay. I'll get my boyfriend involved. He's really good at this kind of stuff.
Exactly.
So before we close down, beyond this book, I'm so interested in your future projects or what you're thinking. I just was approved for a new book to be published and it's going to be coming. And I've actually never felt closer to any book than I do this book that I've written, which is so special. I mean, it's so different than the books I've written. It is on toxic family. It's a big journal prompting book, but I built a house and, it's a formula that I've been using in my office for a long time.
Amazing.
And it's been very helpful. So I just turned it into a book and that's my future project. Plus the podcast is now every week. But what's happening for you, Josh? What are you passionate about? Is there another book that's going to come? What's going to happen?
Yeah, there'll be another book. Not just yet, but I'm already floating ideas in my mind for it. But listen, I'm all about community. I've got an online community that I run that I'm passionate about. And we've been running now sessions across the UK that I call Belong, which are no barrier to entry, accessible events for everybody to come to be together, to do some breath work. No pretense, no kind of sugarcoating. It's all just come together, proper old school community and, give people the opportunity to not be alone anymore. So all of my work is rooted in that and it will continue to be. And so, maybe that's what we'll bring to California when you get the venue.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm so happy and I'm really excited about our event. Now it's spinning through my mind and that would be so great. A lot of people have paired us up before we even met one another.
Yeah.
And that was always really special. And I was introduced to you by Allison Canavan. I think that's how you say her last name. And thank you, Allison, because I started following you and I'm like, oh my gosh, yeah, I've seen his videos, and we've been paired together for a long time. And it's wonderful that we're across the pond because I think there's such a powerful effect that we could have, right? And getting your book going, being really read here, I really want to help you do that because I just think you're so special. And I think it's nice to hear stories through male and female voices. And we do different things, but similar. And your future endeavors, I mean, your book is so good and I already have it. But I get another copy coming soon as well. But I really want people to read your book because you really do all the breathwork stuff and the QR codes. It's such a unique thing. I've never seen that before. And I think it's so special. And I think it helps people get into their bodies. And I think it's, especially in America, like you had said, we're really in our heads. So I'm so thankful you came back on and I was so happy to host you again. And this isn't your last time on my show either. No. I just love conversations. Yeah. We'll just keep them going. But thank you for coming on, Josh. I love and adore you. I will find a venue. I will be in touch on Instagram. I'm sure all the listeners are freaking out right now that we would do an event together.
Let's do it.
And let's do it. We will do it, Josh. And then I will fly to you and we'll do one in your area.
Perfect.
Okay?
Perfect.
Okay. So, all right, everyone. Just Josh, we all love you. Fan favorite, my favorite. And thanks for coming on. And guys, until next week, be well and take care of you. Well, Bravehearts, that concludes our amazing therapy session for the day. Please sign up on my email list at drsherrycampbell.com so that you can be in touch with me and see what's going on in terms of what I'm offering soon, what books are coming out, etc. Talk to you in a couple of weeks.